Okay, welcome to the Stellify podcast. And tonight I'm joined once again by Chris Nicolson, astrologer, shamanic practitioner, and long-time explorer of the relationship between the cosmos and human consciousness. Chris has spent decades studying astrology, spiritual traditions, and the energetic patterns that shape our lives. But tonight we're turning our attention to something we all see almost every night, yet rarely question deeply, and that's the moon. For most people, the moon is just a natural satellite. In astrology, it represents emotion, memory, and the subconscious. But across ancient cultures, esoteric traditions, and modern alternative research, the moon is also described as a mystery object, a possible construct, a reflector, a regulator, and even a form of control mechanism. So tonight we're going to explore the moon from multiple angles. So astronomical, astrological, mythological, and speculative. And let's ask some of the bigger questions. So what is the moon really? And what role does it play in human life and consciousness? So, all right, Chris, it's great to have you on again, mate. It's always a pleasure chatting to you. I know you're an astrologist, so what does the moon represent in a person's chart generally?
Well, just as you said, the emotions are the key factor within a person's astrology. And there's a whole range of things within astrology that come together from other factors like the rising sign, your sun sign, and the other elements. And the moon just ties into that. And there's a reflective element to the moon as well. But really, our emotive, our water is pulled and shoved by the moon. So our emotions within us, our whole being is dragged about by the moon. We know that the moon pulls the Earth's oceans around, and we are made up of a huge amount of water. So its effect upon our physical body is underpinning what astrology does for us as well.
Yeah.
But in its essence, it's really about our emotional range. And it depends where your moon is within your chart as well. You know, it's a complex series of things. Astrology. Many people think astrology is just what's my sun sign, and am I a Libra or a Cancer or something like that. But it's a very complex set of mathematical calculations that go together, and one of those is your moon. And a lot of astrologers, certainly my teacher, told me that, and I believe this to be true, that the moon is probably the third most important factor in your astrological makeup. The first being your sun sign. So your sun sign is your dominant nature. It's your inner being. It's who you truly are, particularly when you're in your comfortable space, when you're at your home with family and friends. The second is your rising sign. Your rising sign is whatever sign is coming up over the horizon at the moment of your birth. And that's the sign that you meet the rest of the world with. So if you meet somebody new, you're going to see them through the lens of your rising sign, and they will see you. So my sun sign is Libra. So I think like a Libran when I'm at home and so on, in a comfortable space. But my rising sign is Capricorn.
Right.
And I meet people as a Capricorn. And then my moon is in Pisces. So the emotional part of my nature is as a Piscean. So depending on where your moon sign is, your emotional state and the other elements, as you described yourself, are part and parcel of that and will be reflected by or influenced by whichever sign they're in. And then on top of that, whichever house they're in as well. Your birth chart is divided into 12 sections, and each of those sections, like a pie chart, each of those sections has certain influences, keywords, important factors. The first house is the house of personality, for example. So if your moon was to land in that, then your emotional character traits would become very prominent within your personality and your character. So it's a fundamentally important part of astrology, and one of those three main things. And anybody who's into astrology, those are the three things that they will always tell each other first: your sun, your moon, and your rising, and you kind of get a good understanding of the individual that you're talking to with those 3 bits of information if you study astrology. So it's very important and very influential.
I mean, without going, I mean, you could end up with a full conversation on astrology alone. I mean, we want to talk about the moon, but
Yeah.
is there reasons for this, the planetary, the way things move in the solar, and the sun and the moon and everything else? Is that something to do with frequencies? Then is that how that affects us as people, do you think?
So that's a really great question, and I've got an interesting little comment on that. Many years ago, when I was first introduced to astrology, the gentleman said to me, "Give me 3 bits of information, and I'll tell you who you are. I'll tell you your darkest secrets and innermost thoughts." And I said, "Yeah, I'm game. What do you need to know?" So, date of birth, time of birth, and place of birth is what he asked for. So I gave him those 3 bits of information, and he proceeded to create a birth chart for me. And he said all these things, and I was like, "How do you know that?" And he said, "That's astrology." But explain it to me. Tell me, as a seeker. I said, "How do you know? Why is that?" And he started to explain the houses, the zodiac signs, the planets, and so on. And he gave me a really interesting description that if your life was a play, the planets, the sun and the moon, they would be the actors. The zodiac signs, which also move, would be the plot, and the houses, which are kind of static, they would be the setting, the scenery.
Right.
And so this all plays out across that. And I said, "Okay, so that's interesting. You're explaining to me about what the houses mean, what the zodiac signs mean, and what each of the planets mean, and that's fantastic. But how does it work?" And he said, "Well, yeah, we just plot how this is in here." And I said, No, you've told me that. That's how you work it out.
Yeah.
But how does it work? Like, why, when my sun is in Libra, why does that work? What is it?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I concentrate on this stuff." So I wrote a couple of emails to some astrologers of the day. This is many years ago, and said, "How does it work?" And they started saying the same stuff as him, which is all good information, but it's not what I was looking for. So that set me on a bit of a quest. I wanted to understand, how does it work?
Yeah.
Like, why does it
Why?
work fundamentally?
Yeah.
So we have to look at a couple of little things to begin with. So I'll use my own chart as an example. As I said, my sun is in Libra. So what that means is that as we go round the calendar year, the solar year, my birthday's in October. So at that point, we've got the Earth and the Sun. Well, I'll put it here. So here's the Earth and here's the Sun. So behind the Sun is Libra. If we blot out the light of the Sun and look behind it from our Earth's vantage point, we will see the constellation of Libra. So the Sun is in Libra, and it is radiating. It is like a lens for the frequencies coming from all those stars. Now we know, and some people who are against astrology will say, well, all the stars within that constellation, they only look like that constellation because of where we see them from our vantage point. And actually, they're not necessarily that close to each other. But that's kind of irrelevant, because they're all beaming frequency. They're all beaming energy, which can be turned into sound. It has a vibration. And all of them are coming from that same directional point within space, and therefore they have an effect. So I went looking for, I didn't stumble upon this straight away. I was studying lots of other things, and it was when I got really into the quest for sound and an understanding of that, that I realized that some of the things that you could figure out in sound and the way it works. If you apply that to astrology, suddenly it opened it up. So I'll give you an example. When people say, how can someone born on the same day, or if you're a Libra and I'm a Libra, why are we different people? So let's imagine a big stage, and on that big stage you're stood right in the middle, and a little distance away is someone playing an instrument. They're playing a flute, for example, and they're playing one tone, and that's like the tone coming from the planets. We know that all the planets are giving off frequencies, and we know that all the stars are giving off frequencies. And actually, a friend of mine, who's a lecturer in sound, he travels the world talking about sound, and I met him in Edinburgh many years ago, and I spoke about sound from a spiritual and esoteric standpoint, and he spoke about it from a scientific standpoint, and we had a great conversation. A mutual friend set up this conversation, and I didn't change my language and he didn't change his, and we were still able to understand each other. A guy called Michael, just fantastic guy. And he was part of a project where they took the frequencies of the various planets and turned them into sound. So you can listen, and they're on YouTube. You can listen to the sound of Saturn, listen to the sound of Mars, and so on, and the moon. So when applying this logic to astrology, we go back to a little example. So you've got you standing on a stage, and there's someone playing a few feet away from you, and you can pick up the sound of the flute. Now we're going to get the person with the flute to move around a little bit, and we're going to bring someone else in with another instrument, a clarinet, and they're playing a different tone, and they're a few feet further away, and the flute player has now changed position, and they play the same tone, and the clarinet player plays their tone. These two tones, the sound waves, by the time they reach your eardrum, have joined together, and you hear a new sound. Now bring in another instrument and get the first two to move around a little bit and maybe change their distance from you slightly, and another instrument comes in, and then three sounds are coming at you, and all those three sounds together create a unique new sound that you're hearing. Now bring more and more instruments in, and bring all of their sounds coming in, and they are always in constant flux. They're never standing still. But at the instant you're born, there is a standing still. There's a snapshot of all of those moments, all of those sounds, all of those frequencies. And so therefore they have a unique, in that moment, snapshot of energies, of frequencies coming towards you. So as you're born, this is what your birth chart describes. It shows all of the elements from all of the different constellations and from the planets and the luminaries of who you are. And our ancestors have taken a long time to sit and work through this and figure it out as to what they mean, and given them references as to the moon meaning this and the sun meaning that, and if it's in the first house it's this, and if it's in this astrological sign it means something else. So without going too deeply into astrology, a little snapshot there of how it works. I spent all those years looking back, or looking for this, and I went back to that gentleman who first taught me, and I said, I figured it out. This is how it works. This is how astrology works. It's about frequency. It's about it coming over, and them all coming together at the same time. And he said, yeah, that's it. That's it. You've got it. So when I teach about astrology, that's part of the lesson, is breaking it down, understanding the essentially universal cymatic pattern that is created in a snapshot moment of you at your birth, and the moon is a fundamental part of it.
It's incredible, really, because you think about the influences that go on in our world from political standpoints or peer standpoints or family or whatever, but we are being pretty much governed by situations that are out of this world?
We are funded. Our whole world and society is based upon stuff that's out of this world. Astrology underpins it. There's many people poo-poo it and don't like it and say it's, you know, a lot of shit. But actually, when you ask them, why are we in the year 2026? Why are there 7 days of the week? Why are there 12 months in the year? It's astrology. That's the answer. Which brings us to a point about the moon. I don't know if this is one of your questions, but there's a lot of stuff being said recently, and it's probably been for about a decade or so that it's got more and more traction online, that we are being misled by the powers that be about the number of months in a year.
Yeah.
So months comes from months. It's a month.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where that word comes from. So there is a meme going around and a lot of people talking about it. I've seen quite a few podcasters and bloggers talk about
13 months.
Yeah, 13 months is 28 days, and it should be, you know, we should have, that's exactly how many we should have, and it would work perfectly. And it would always start on a Monday or a Sunday or whatever.
Moon day.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. What is the first day of the week? We can come back to that. The first day of the week should be Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
I'll do this moon bit first, and we can, if you remember, if I remember, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
In fact, let me take a note. Days of the week. I'll just write that down, and then I'll remember. So the moon, 13 months. It all fits lovely. We can look at the back of a turtle and go, oh, there's 28 of them and there's 13 of them. And oh, that's the universe telling us through the shell of a turtle that we should have 13 months with 28 days because the moon cycle is 28 days long. No, it's not. No, it's not. The moon is not in a 28-day cycle. It's close. And there are actually more than one cycles of the moon.
Right.
So we have one cycle where the moon gets right back to its original point, one full circle of the Earth, if the Earth was standing still, if it wasn't moving. And that's 27.2 days.
Right.
So that's not 28 days. But because the Earth's in motion, for the actual cycle of the moon to get back relative so that we see it return to the same position is 29.5 days.
Right. Okay.
It's called the synodic month. So the synodic month is longer than 28 days. The 12 months of our year are told to us, this ancient tale is told to us about our solar system. It's been told to us in a story form so that we can tell our children and we can make sure that we can pass on this knowledge.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a global cataclysm tomorrow, and you and I and a bunch of the listeners today survive, and we're all sat around the fire and we're talking about all of the jobs, the knowledge, the information that's been lost because computers are gone, books are gone. The only place that's knowledge has been able to survive is in our heads. So we look at those young mothers who've survived with their children and the children who are going to be born after the cataclysm, who don't remember this old world. What do we want to teach those kids? Because we're just trying to survive. We're not trying to be nuclear physicists anymore. We're not trying to do any of those things. We might use some of our individual skills to help us to survive and hopefully to thrive, but we just want to stay alive. We want to feed ourselves. We want to keep ourselves clothed, and we want shelter. And we want to be secure and safe. So all our time's going to go into that because 90% of the world has been wiped out, and it's a struggle. So what do we want to teach our children? Well, one of the big important things I would suggest is that we teach them about the seasons so that they can plant crops and they can survive.
Yeah.
So we know, despite what some people might say, that the Earth revolves around the sun, and it does it in a solar year, and there's 4 seasons because of the Earth's tilt.
Yeah.
And that creates summer and spring and autumn and winter. And there's good times within that, and to plant crops, and good times to harvest. And so we create a story. And for stories to survive, you have to keep them as a verbal form. If you write a story down, they say you kill it. Think about Shakespeare. In Shakespeare's day, nobody needed a translator to tell you what he was actually saying. You could hear his, to whoever Shakespeare was, you could hear the words in those plays, and being alive at that time, you would understand what was being said because it was in your everyday language. But if it had been a verbal story and passed down through the storytellers, the troubadours, the wandering minstrels, as language progressed, because language always evolves, we can see new words being introduced by the young people today, and we did when we were young as well. Those stories would have evolved over the decades and centuries, so that when you were to hear Romeo and Juliet or any other of those tales today, you would hear it in our modern tongue, and you wouldn't need a scholar to tell you what it meant. So that's how you could say that that story died, or those stories were killed because they were written down, and now they're in this old, dead way of speaking that only a few people can decipher. So if we keep the story alive and we tell the story of the sun's journey from our perspective around the Earth during a 12-month cycle, there's a few things we want to give scientifically to our children. So we tell them about the seasons, we tell them about the Earth's tilt, we tell them about the zodiac signs that sit on the ecliptic, the plane that the moon and the sun and the planets all travel around on. And we'd give them that information so that they could sow crops. So we tell that as a story form. And that story has become the story, in my understanding, of astrotheology. That's what the story of Jesus is. He is the avatar for the sun in the age of Pisces. And Jesus had 12 core followers, not 13. King Arthur, another version of the Tale of the Sun, had 12 knights of the Round Table, not 13. We still tell those stories today. Even in some modern movies, there is this hat tip to the story of the sun. You have the being who walks across the sky, the Skywalker. Look, Skywalker. He's the sun. It's in all of those tales. So in all of those, it was always 12. And if you go back before Jesus and look at Mithra, and go back before Mithra and look at all the other tales where there was a savior who was born again and had 12 followers, it's always 12.
Yeah.
So this story of 13 moons comes from two different things. The first part is astrologically. There was a book written, I believe, in the 60s, where a gentleman proposed that there were actually, instead of 12, but 14 zodiac signs. And he introduced two other constellations that are pretty much on the ecliptic that the rest of the zodiac's on. And he added them in his book. That didn't get any traction. And a couple of decades later, someone else came, dropped one of those, and kept one, and said that that was the 13th sign of the zodiac. So this has only ever been in modern times in the last 60 years.
Oh, wow.
There is nothing before that that suggests there's a 13th constellation within the zodiac, and the ancient tales all talk about 12.
Right.
So that's one half of it, and I'm sure you've heard those stories of the 13 zodiac
I
sign
have,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
So then the other side is in relation to full moons. So as I've already pointed out, the synodic cycle of the moon is 29.5 days.
Yeah.
And the moon has its own cycle. You know, the solar cycle with the sun, with the earth orbiting the sun, it goes round in 365 and a quarter days and 366 orbits, which I'll come back to. We only notice 365, but when axial spins, not orbits. One orbit of the sun is 366 axial spins of the earth. We don't notice one of them. We only see 365. And within that period of 365 days, depending when the first full moon of the year is, will dictate whether we will have 12 full moons that year
Oh,
or
wow.
13.
Right.
So this year we had a full moon very early in January. We've just had a full moon on Sunday. We're at the start of February. We had the full moon on Sunday. There's another full moon the 1st of March. So the full moon that was early in January. And because of that, that's going to allow us at the end of December this year to have a 13th full moon. So 2026 has 13 full moons, but last year only had 12. And on average, if you take, say, 13 years in a row, you're going to get 8 of them with 12 and 5 of them with 13. So there's an 8-to-5 ratio of 12 full moons in the year to 13 full moons in a year. So 12 full moons are more common, and that's also why there's 12 months in the year. Yeah, so that's that double thing, the 12 zodiac signs and the more common 12 full moons. That's what gives us 12 months of the year. And it can't be 12 at 28 days long, because that doesn't correlate to the moon's actual cycle of 29 and a half. Of course, I always say I could be wrong. Please go and check for yourself, write it down in a diary, look and see. You know, everybody can go out and see the moon themselves, so they don't need to take anyone else's word for it. They can write it down and have a look and judge for themselves.
I mean, again, we want to stick to the topic, but I can't help thinking about how flat Earth people will respond to this podcast straight away. You know, because I'm not a flat Earther, but I'm not a globe either. I don't know. I don't know, because I just don't know. But I'm interested in the fact that someone like, say, astrotheologist, the legend that is Santos Bonacci, would then become such a flat earther, but yet would tell these not stories, but the thesis, the whole, because he's a great teacher of astrotheology. And
Brother Santos, I love him.
Yeah, me too.
I remember his early days of Mr. Astrotheology before he got into his syncretism, and I loved what he was doing. I was watching online a few years ago, and some stuff happened with Santos. I don't know, because I wasn't there in Australia. I didn't see exactly what physically happened. I just saw the fallout from it. And I don't know if you remember, he got put in prison for...
Yeah, it was he was doing a common law thing, wasn't he? And they put him in prison, didn't they?
He was a dead, gentle, lovely, kind, generous man prior to that. And he came out, and he was a bit different.
He's got a lot of anger, bless him. I know.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of respect for him as an individual and for his early work. But I was very surprised to hear him come out as a flat earther, and I feel like he's been led down a bit of a pathway. It's not for me to judge, you know, as
No,
a
no. It's interesting though. It's an interesting,
yeah.
because I've got a lot of respect for Santos. A lot of my early awareness years spent listening to Santos, and especially even the syncretism stuff. And I love all of it. I love his teachings. Absolutely love it. I just thought it was very interesting slant from someone who teaches astrology and theology to
Yeah,
speak to a flat
it greatly
earther.
surprised me. I don't I'm not a flat earther, and I think you know that, and
Mm,
we don't it's not a bad subject to cover very briefly because we have touched on it. We're using a conversation about the moon and talking about the way the solar system works. And if you're a flat earther, the way I'm talking just doesn't work for you.
yeah.
And that's okay. I'll defend everybody's right to believe what they want,
Mm, mm.
but I'm not going to change my mind on it. I have looked deeply at it, and excuse me, I can remember when the flat Earth, the most recent upsurgence in the flat Earth came out, and I participated in a debate. I don't know if you were
Yeah, I
there.
believe it was with Dave. Was it Flat
Yeah,
Earth Dave? No, was it Flat Earth?
yeah,
Yeah,
it was.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
yeah. That was a Carry On Camping Festival about 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Yeah, the Great Flat Earth debate. It's on my YouTube page.
Okay.
The video. It was very interesting, and Dave, lovely guy,
Mm,
didn't didn't quite know how to cope with some of the things that I was talking about because I wasn't talking about the usual stuff that Globe Earthers talking about. I was talking about astrology. I was talking about ancient megaliths and how our ancestors built um, all the megaliths in the UK and most likely all across the world using
mm,
sacred measurements that are developed from the shape of the earth, the dimensions of the earth, the dimensions of the moon, the relationship between the earth, the moon, and the sun. And it maths doesn't lie, numbers don't lie. Yeah, you can draw statistics out of things and make stuff up as you go with statistics. You can play around with them, but basic mathematical equations and numbers, they just they just give you numbers. They tell you what they tell you, and the that points to me very much that the Earth is a globe.
mm.
But without going too deep into that, we can talk about that if you wish. But the flat Earth story, although it's a very old one, it was originally a society
Mhm.
a few hundred years ago, which was a joke society um, down down south in the lower part of England that was first formed, I believe. It didn't really have any members other than jokey members until 2013.
Okay.
So in 2010, 2009, 2010, 2011, as a card carrying, badge wearing member of the community who do not believe what the men in suits tell us and think a lot of it is conspiracy. Um, I was researching. I was part of a growing, evolving community that was. It took a bit of a surge in 2001 with 9/11,
Mhm.
and we reached a kind of a peak, and then there was a steady trickle of people joining. Then 2012, it started to escalate.
Mhm.
2020, of course, the conspiracy movement exploded, and people really stopped believing. Many people, more people, which was very encouraging. But 2009, 10, and 11, the movement was growing and growing and growing, and it was doing really well. And we were all talking about communities going off grid,
Yeah.
free energy devices,
Yeah.
orgone devices to change the weather. There was amazing stuff, and people were getting together to support each other and on communities online and forums and watching loads of videos and researching and sharing stuff. It was fantastic. It was a great time. And then during 2012, and people should check this for themselves, the then president of the US was Obama. And
Mhm.
Obama, in three of his presidential addresses during 2012, put the words conspiracy theorists and the Flat Earth Society in the same sentence.
Okay.
None of us were talking about it. It wasn't on any of the forums.
Mm.
And then a video was released, and that video, I think it was called "Where Did All the Trees Go?"
Right.
I think that's the title. It's been a while.
Mm.
And it was suggesting that many of the big flat top mountains that look a bit like a tree stump were actually these ancient, massive, tall trees.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposedly made in some guy's bedroom and was, just a guy in his bedroom making a video. But this video, and it was slick.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was a
Well
really
produced.
well made.
Yeah.
Yeah, extremely well produced video. Now, I wasn't looking at all. I wasn't interested, and I wasn't looking for anything on the flat earth. But on YouTube, down the side, there's that column recommended for you.
Yeah.
So I'm looking up stuff. In late 2011, there was a comet that went past us that wasn't quite as big as 3i Atlas and all the stuff that's been said recently about that. It was called Comet Elenin. And there was people saying Elenin's going to hit us and this, that, and the other. So I remember researching about that, and I spent a bit of time early 2012 looking at other comets and that kind of stuff. And as I'm researching some of these things, the videos I'm looking up on YouTube, this video kept popping up at the top of the recommended for you.
Mm.
And I don't like adverts. They annoy me. Like, if you intrude in my life and advertise something, I'm purposely not buying because
I'm like that.
So this thing came up on the side, and I remember saying to my ex-wife, like, look at this video keeps popping up. It's really annoying. Like, that's pissing me off. Why is that doing that? How do these videos get here? Because I'm not searching for flat earth. That's a lot of shit. So I thought, wait a minute, let's find out, how do these videos end up in this column? And YouTube make a fortune by companies paying them to nudge their videos into that space. It's literally called nudging. That's what they do. So I realized that these videos that were getting nudged in were done on purpose. So that flat earth, and then the stuff, that flat earth video, and then the stuff with that guy Eric
Dubay.
Yes.
Yeah.
He suddenly became a prominent figure. And watched some bits of his, and as we say in Scotland, I smell shit here. There's something a bit whiffy. But at that same point, those communities online that were thriving some 6 months before, they started to fall apart.
Okay.
They started to have these internal arguments. People were falling out with each other. It was horrendous to watch, because what was really interesting is that at the start of the flat earth story relaunch in 2013, it immediately became a subject where, if you don't believe it, you're one of them.
Never mind the fact, conquer, eh?
Right? Never mind the fact that I don't believe that, but I also don't believe that it was two planes that took down those towers, and Building 7 just got a little bit tired and decided to collapse and melt a whole pile of gold.
So it's all or nothing, Chris, eh?
Right? If I don't believe that, then I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And that really, like, I was there. I was watching. I was part of the community, and I saw it happen. And I was really upset by that. And I was trying to speak to others in the community, and there was just a split. And actually, until 2020, the community never recovered.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
That's very interesting. So to me, the flat earth discussion, and that's the reason I was willing to have the chat at the Carry On Camping Festival. Yeah, and it was supposed to be a friend of mine who's a flat earther. supposed to be a friend of mine who was going to do the debate originally with me, but he couldn't do it. He's a teacher, and the school told him, because he let them know what he was doing, some of his colleagues, and they said, if you participate in this, you're going to lose your job.
Wow.
So he had to come back to me and say, look, I can't participate in the debate, because we were going to have a nice friendly debate. So we went looking, the organizer of the festival went looking for another flat earther, found Dave, and allegedly Dave,
Yeah, that's right.
and invited him on. And you know, he's a lovely guy, but he was determined to battle. He just, you know, he was in that headspace of many other flat earthers where they want to do battle on the subject. And we spoke beforehand, and I tried to say, look, the main, in my notes that I had, the main word that I had written down in bold was unity. It doesn't matter whether you believe that and I believe this. We can still be part of the awakening movement. It's just
Absolutely.
like football. You support the one in red and I support the one in green, and that's okay. We can still be friends. It's just football, you know? So
It's true. But you see that in the freedom, truther movement constantly.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
always polarized by and infiltrated. So this is what you're saying, really, in a way, that was infiltration to polarize and divide people up. That was in a movement.
Yeah, I've seen many of those since
Oh
those
yeah,
years.
yeah. It's
You know,
happening all the
you,
time.
you can imagine being in power and having endless money at your disposal and having some, you know, 3-letter agency filling a basement full of computers and paying people great amounts of money to infiltrate the movement and sit there having a great laugh, you know, smoking a bit of weed or hitting some DMT and thinking, what's the craziest idea we can come up with to tell all these, you know, people that they'll believe in. And if we get them believing in that, we can discredit the whole movement. And to me, that's what flat earth is, because there's so many people who out with the awake movement that if you say that as your opening gambit, they roll their eyes, the shutters go down, and they're not listening. It doesn't matter what you say about pedophiles in power, about the, you know, 9/11, about anything else. You know, you can go back and tell them about the Reichstag or the Gulf of Tonkin. It doesn't matter. They've already shut the doors on you, and they're not listening to your stories of black flag events and the subterfuge and the control that people in power have on us, and the way that they control the narrative and change the story to suit their needs. So it's not only damaging to the movement, it's also damaging to the movement from within, from those who are awake, but it's damaging to the possibility of bringing other people in, because it becomes something of ridicule. And if that's your main thing that you say, then that's unfortunately going to close a lot of doors for the rest of us.
Yeah, and it is happening in so many ways, and we will move back to the moon absolutely soon. But I just want to make a point that it's happening very much in the alternative media constantly. You know, there's a lot of money involved in the alternative media. It's very difficult to know who to trust, and there's a lot of Pied Pipers in those well paid Pied Pipers. And it makes it very difficult. This awareness, awakening, whatever you want to call it, it makes it very tricky as we're moving forward. And you can get stuck in these lanes. And like you say, cognitive dissonance. And we've had a podcast on that alone in the past. It's in religion and everything. You know, we're very fallible. Human beings are very fallible to being stuck in the program and
Yes.
refusing to come out of it and protecting that program no matter what. Like I said, I don't know because I've not studied it, if it's flat earth or globe. I don't know because I've not studied it. So I'm open to listening and hearing more. But speaking of the moon, though, and while we're on the flat earth subject, a lot of people would say that the moon, the reflection of the moon, is a map of the flat earth. That's
Yeah.
what, because I mean, that's something I've heard. I don't know because I don't know. But the moon only shows one face, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier on that the Earth has it spins on its axis 366 times as it orbits the sun, but we only notice 365. So the reason I reference that is we can use this to understand the moon, and we can use the moon to understand that, because in some of the, I'm going to talk about some calculations in a little bit about the moon, and this is a relevant point to it. So we have the moon. Here's the cap of my drinking cup. So this is the face of the moon that we can see, and this is the Earth. So there we are. We can see the face of the moon. Some people say that the moon does not spin on its axis because we always see the same face. So the moon goes round the Earth. Now, if I take the Earth out and I move the moon round, if we get to that side and put the Earth back in, the Earth, people on this side of the Earth can now see the back of the moon, but they don't. So as the moon is rotating around the Earth, it has one axial spin for one orbit. And so the same face is facing the moon at all times. And because it's tidally locked, which is really interesting, because it's tidally locked to the Earth, it's on an almost perfect circular orbit rather than it being elliptical. So although it does have a bit of flex, it moves away by a few thousand miles and back by a few thousand miles, it's generally got a pretty circular orbit. So if I take the Earth out of that and the moon did not spin, it would do that. But it does that. And if we tighten the circle, then for one axial spin of the moon, it does one orbit of the Earth. But because we are looking at it from our vantage point off that one orbit, the orbit removes the view, in essence. We don't notice the axial spin of the moon because it is deleted by the orbit around the Earth. Now, the Earth is going around the sun, and we do, because it takes a lot longer, we do notice the axial spin. It gives us our days and nights. But in one orbit of the sun, just like that one orbit for the moon around the Earth, there is one axial spin lost by the Earth.
Okay.
So the Earth actually rotates on its axis 366 times. Now, this is another argument as well, or a point that can be used to show our ancestors knew that we live on a globe. So, in a circle, how many degrees are there?
Oh, 365. Yeah.
No, 360.
360, sorry.
So there's 360 degrees in a circle. You know, with 108 degrees for half of it. A right angle is 90 degrees, and half of that is 45 degrees. So why did our ancestors pick 360 degrees for the circle? Which ancestors were it? And why did they pick that number? Is it just an arbitrary number, a random number? Did they pick it for a reason? Where did it originate? Well, we know that it originated the 360 degrees with the Babylonians and the Sumerians. And the Babylonians and Sumerians, they had a counting system that was different from ours. We count in tens. So we've got decimals of 10, 10 times 10 is 100, 10 times 100 is 1,000. So we've got a system that works on tens.
Yeah.
Base 10 counting system. They didn't. They had a base 60 counting system. There are relics of their basic counting system in our time and our navigation. 60 minutes, 60 seconds. These come from those days. And 360 itself is a fascinating number. It's divisible by a number of integers, and a number of smaller numbers divide into 360 that many other numbers don't do, without decimalization, that is. So
Yeah.
360, without getting too mathematical, is a fantastic number to use. So why did the Babylonians have 360? And if we go back and research, we find out that actually the original number that they used in their circle was 366 degrees. And it is suggested, and I believe this to be true, obviously I could be wrong, it's suggested that they picked 366 because that's the number of axial spins of the Earth in one solar year. And that was the biggest circle, the biggest holy, sacred circle that our ancestors could participate in knowingly.
Right.
So we can draw a circle, but the biggest one, as you go bigger and bigger and bigger, the biggest circle that we can actually understand and conceptualize and be part of is the circle of the Earth orbiting the Sun. And that takes 366 orbits, axial spins off the Earth for that one orbit. So when that number got to our ancestors, the Babylonians, they realized with their base 60 counting system that they would benefit from removing 6 of those digits and make it easier
Okay.
to not have decimalization until you get much further down. You know, you can get right down to 45 degrees before you're going to 22.5 and you're getting a decimal, then you're getting a fraction. Within the fraction, you know, rather than whole numbers.
Yeah.
So they took off the 6 degrees, made it 360. And so that's why we have 360 degrees in a circle rather than why not 100 or 1,000?
Yeah.
Why have 360? It's a very interesting question, something that we take for granted. And it's a question that I've asked a few flat earthers, you know, is 360 degrees in a circle, is geometry part of the cabal? Like, can I draw a circle and not make myself the spawn of the devil by doing so? Is that okay? Where did it come from? Because if you look, that's the root. And that's why we have that.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's really interesting. And I found that out when I was researching about ancient sites.
Right.
And this all ties in with the moon. So there was a guy called Alexander Thom. He was a Scottish engineer from Ayrshire.
Right.
And the wonderful engineer, and he became so good, he became the engineer, the teacher, the professor of engineering at Oxford. And he designed and had built the School of Engineering, which is today called the Alexander Thom Building. So if you go to Oxford to study engineering, that's the building that you'll learn in. In his spare time, he visited ancient sites across the UK. And he took his equipment so that he could measure and survey. He wasn't a surveyor, but he taught himself how to do it. A very clever man. And he would holiday in various places and he would measure. And he wrote down the data. Over 50 years, he wrote down the data. And after many years of this, he sat and collated the data and started analysing the numbers. And he realised that there was a number that kept popping up that was either a whole or a fraction, like a half or a quarter or a third of this number, or 1/40th. So Alexander Thom travelled the UK, studying ancient sites, took his measuring equipment, found all these measurements that seemed to show a number that was cropping up, repeating over and over and over again. And this number is 2.722 feet in our current measurements. And it was dubbed the megalithic yard. And 1/40th of that is the megalithic inch. And he found that it was across the board, Stonehenge, Avebury, Arbor Low, all of them have this measurement. And he suggested that it was possible that our ancestors used this as a base measurement. Now, the anthropologists and archaeologists of his day, they poo-pooed that. They said that can't be true. You're not an archaeologist. You're not an anthropologist. You're just an engineer. And the archaeologists said there would be evidence around that. If there was this great figure that they used, it would be used in other things, and we would see it in society, and we don't. And the anthropologists said the same thing, but it was also said by them that there would have been error. Now, I know, as someone who has worked with timber all my life, if you cut a piece of wood and then use that to measure the next piece of wood instead of using the measuring tape, and then use the second one to measure a third piece of wood, by the time you've cut 4 or 5 bits of wood, they're all of different lengths. You need to go back to your original measure each time. So there's a bit of truth in that there would have been error had that been the way. You know, imagine you were traveling from where you stay with your tribe. You've heard that I've got this sacred measurement, this holy measurement. And so you get your retinue of people and you travel across the land and you pay tribute to me, and I get my holy rood, my holy rod. That's what the palace at the bottom of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh is called, Holy Rood Palace.
Oh, right. Okay.
The Holy Rod.
Okay.
They stole it and took it down to London. It's the stick that Black Rod bangs on the doors of Parliament.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it's the bottom of the Royal Mile, which is the Scottish Mile is different from the English Mile, which is interesting.
That's
slightly
interesting.
Slightly
Didn't know
longer.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another interesting journey we could go on with Scotland and Egypt being these ancient cultures, and Greece as well, with some very interesting correlations.
We'll do that next time.
But I digress. So you've then come and you've got that measurement from me and you're taking it back to your land, but you've had to pay for travel for you and your retinue to travel through inhospitable lands, and you've paid me tribute and you want to make some of your money back. So on the way back, you stop off and you sell that measure to other people. And just like us cutting those different measures of wood, there would be error. So Alexander Thom said, I don't really care to argue the point. There's the maths. You guys can argue it, you know, carry on. It's all fine. That's the data. Do what you want with it. Now, many years later, a couple of researchers were looking at his work and were trying to reverse engineer the megalithic yard. So they wondered, what would our ancestors have had available to them? What tools could we use? And what methods of measurement could we use? And they recognized that the movement of the planets across the static backdrop of the stars is a good way to measure. So they looked for the planet that had the most stable journey across the sky, because some of them move, you know, slightly faster and slower based on where they are in the sky. And they found that Venus was the one with the most steady movement. So what they decided, after much, you know, messing around, they thought, well, if we could look at Venus's movement, what other movement could we measure that against? Well, we could use the Earth's rotation. So to use the Earth's rotation, because Venus is sat there in the sky and it's moving across, but the Earth's also rotating on its axis. If we plot out a circle and divide it into degrees and get 1 degree of arc and create a little window that Venus can travel through, so you're creating a little box that Venus, like my eye is just now, moved across the box. We can use that. We can try and use that. You know, that's movement within the solar system, and it's steady, and we don't need a measuring tape. We're using the Earth and Venus and the stars. So I'll not bore you with all the maths, but they put a stake in the ground,
Right.
and then they walked a set number of steps away from that stake, and they put a second one in.
Yeah.
And then they turned to the side and walked a set number of steps and put a third in. And they had figured out by using these set numbers of steps, and it doesn't matter your stride length, because if it's the same person doing the stride length, it's always going to work out fine.
Yeah.
The number of strides forward is 244, which is important. Why I mentioned that. So if you go back to your original stake, looking between those two other stakes is exactly 1 degree out of the circle. And those researchers did it based on a 366 degree circle, because our ancestors,
Okay.
pre-Babylonian, who built the sacred sites, would not have been using a 360 degree circle. It would have been the original one.
Mm.
So they tried the 360, that didn't work. So they tried the 366, that eventually did work. So you've now got a window, and you're waiting on a clear sky for Venus. It's set at an angle because of the way Venus moves through the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And as Venus moves into the box, they then used a pendulum. Let that pendulum swing.
Right.
Because you can count time with a pendulum.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the length of the string, the shorter the string, the quicker it moves back and forth. The longer, it has a slower back and forth movement. So the number of steps they walked forward, 244, they had to swing that pendulum that exact number of times as Venus traversed that box.
Mm.
Once they'd figured it out, because if it was too short, they'd reach 244 before it reached the end. And if it was too long, Venus would have left the box before they reached 244. So they play around over a number of nights until they get the right length. That length is exactly half of the number that Alexander Thom came up with, the megalithic yard. So we don't need a rod. We don't need a stick that I can measure mine against yours. We just need a wise man or woman to be walking across the country, helping people build sacred sites for all the reasons they wanted to build them, and giving them this bit of information and showing them how to do it, and probably getting well paid in the process.
Mm.
So you then have, with this simple method, which I hope I've explained clearly for everybody to understand, a way to get the megalithic yard from the movement of Venus, the Earth's rotation, and the orbit and the axial orbit of the Earth around the Sun. So that gets rid of that one query that was brought up about it having a variance in the measure. It couldn't be that accurate.
Mm.
The other one that was said by the archaeologists and anthropologists was that it would have been used in other parts of society. So they started playing around with the megalithic yard and seeing if they could come up with different measures. They took 1/10 and made it into a cube,
Right.
and filled that cube with liquid, and then measured how much the liquid was. Turns out it's exactly an imperial pint.
Oh, wow.
They poured the pint out and put grain in, and it's exactly an imperial pound.
Wow.
Now, you obviously have pulled pints for a living.
Mm.
Did you know that the imperial system is lost in the mists of time? They don't know quite where it came from. It's some ancient thing.
No, I didn't
But
know
here
that.
we have an understanding that shows that there's a measurement that is encoded in our standing stones that show us that our ancestors understood the rotation of the stars, of the planets, of the sun and the moon, and the Earth's axial spin to a degree that the flat earthers of today and many other people don't understand.
It's fascinating.
It's amazing. And all of that correlates the sun, the moon, and the earth. in this triune of information, because the megalithic yard, when you start taking the moon's geometry, its size, and instead of having it in meters and kilometers or feet and inches, but having it in the megalithic yards, you can get exact figures for the measurements of the moon, and the correlation to the sun gives you exact measurements as well. And using the megalithic yard to look at the ratio of the sizes between those three objects, the Earth and those two luminaries, the megalithic yard actually gives us unbelievable mathematics that suggest to anybody with an eye for numbers that this is no arbitrary random thing. There's another couple of researchers were looking at that very fact, and they've written a book which is called Who Built the Moon?
All right.
Just looking at all that data. They had originally been looking at the Alexander Tom's figures, and they came to the conclusion that the moon has to be a construct.
Yeah.
It has to be a construct because the mathematics is too pure. It's too accurate. It's far too precise.
To be an accident.
Random. Yeah. Which is fascinating. And of course, they could be wrong. They're putting their interpretation, and I haven't gone up and measured the moon. I do not think that it's a map of the flat Earth. I think that's some random guy or woman sitting having a great laugh in some 3-letter agency, going, look at the crazy idea that I made get traction with people. They'll believe anything, won't they? Some of this shit's amazing. But in actuality, when we look at the mathematics, to me is much more exciting, is much more interesting, because numbers don't lie. You can try and interpret them in a number of ways, of course, but looking at them and translating those measurements into the megalithic yard, it shows us that the moon itself isn't just interesting because from our perspective, it looks to be the same size as the sun. It just happens to be 400 times closer and 400 times smaller, so that it looks like it's the same size. Which, that's fascinating. But then when we start looking at the dimensions of it and the measurements of those dimensions, we can tie that into the measurements of the megalithic yard, which our ancestors have built into stone. And then that makes us ask the question, why the fuck did they do that? How did they know that measurement? How did they get that? And it's correlating our sun as well as our moon, and as well as the Earth's orbit and its rotation and its axial spin. It just becomes bamboozling that this level of information and understanding is available to us, and says to me that this is probably not just coincidence, that there's something more at play, which makes me ask lots of questions about the moon. There are many other questions to ask about it, but just that basic point of mathematics. And some people say, and whether this is true or not, that the moon is moving slightly away, is continually moving away from the Earth. I think at the rate that fingernails grow, apparently. About 3.5 centimeters a year is the agreed distance that it incrementally moves away from the Earth. So that made me ask the question, how long ago would the moon have been too close to the Earth to offer proper eclipses? We have, because of we can have two different types of eclipse. Lunar and solar eclipse, and that's dependent on which, with the lineup of the sun, the moon, and the Earth. how far back do we have to go before you can only have solar eclipses? Because if it was closer to us, the moon would appear bigger than the sun, and therefore when it's in front of the sun, it's definitely covering it. But when it's on the other side, you wouldn't get a full eclipse with the Earth's shadow from the moon.
Yeah, because it's perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's perfect on both sides at the moment.
Mm.
So the data that you get online doing the mathematics, and I can't say that I did the maths myself. I got some astrological or astronomical computers to work it out and give me the data.
Mm.
I believe it's like 1.5 billion years ago that it moved into a position where it was perfect, and it's another 500 million years before it'll move too far away that it won't provide perfect eclipses. So a 2 billion year period that the moon is in this perfect spot. That is, of course, if it's always been there. But we have ancient mythology that talks about a time before the moon.
There's even talks of 2 moons, isn't there?
There is.
But before we get there, I was going to say as well, lucky our, the ancient ones were didn't have chemtrails, Chris, innit? Otherwise, we wouldn't be we wouldn't be having these astrological equations going on, would we?
No, mate, not at all. It makes it so difficult to go out on the spring equinox and have a look at the sunrise because it's always cloudy. I mean, I know we live on an island and we have maritime weather here, so it is often cloudy. But yeah, it does make it very difficult.
It makes it very difficult. But quick question before we move away from the flat Earth thing. You often see, or I've often seen the Earth, the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that?
So that's because they're on 2 different cycles.
Okay.
So the sun has the solar cycle, and that's we've already discussed that 365 and a quarter days, and that gives us our solar year. That's the year that we utilize. We overlay that with the 12 months, the average being more, 12 full moons in one solar year than 13. But the moon actually has a repeating cycle of its own that takes roughly 19 years.
Okay.
And it actually moves in such a way that we can see its highest point in the sky and its lowest point in the sky. And you'll notice that the moon moves in a particular way, and sometimes it's high and sometimes it's low in different parts of the sky.
Yeah.
So if you were to plot that out, it actually takes 19 years of plotting it out every day and every night to see those spots, and then that pattern will start to repeat again. It's a very interesting pattern. Famously, I think it was Sir Isaac Newton had said that he's quoted by many as saying that the moon gave him a headache, but there's no direct quote in any of his works.
Right.
It's more that he said that he actually put trying to figure out the moon's movements. He shoved them to one side for a while because it's such a weird set of movements that it was difficult to measure. Eventually, the measurements have been made. But our ancestors and ancestors in other parts of the world, they had it figured out centuries ago. They knew that these movements were there. And in fact, our standing stones in the UK and around the world, many of them are solar calendars and many of them are lunar calendars. And if you see any stone circle with 19 stones, there's one in the bottom of Cornwall. It's quite near Land's End. It's called, and I might butcher the pronunciation, but I call it Boscawen Un. And it's a 19 stone circle, one of which, the western stone, is this massive piece of quartz.
Right.
It's amazing. Like, it's proper amazing, that stone. And in the middle is a big standing stone that's tilted facing the east.
Oh, well.
It's really nice. If you go down there, I highly recommend a visit. It's a beautiful, beautiful stone circle. It's a 19 stones in that circle, and it's known as a moon calendar.
Oh, okay.
So 19 is the number much more associated with the moon than any other, certainly more than 13. And our ancestors knew that. And that lunar cycle goes through a big process. Now, here's an interesting thing about the moon. Every time you see a full moon, it comes out as it starts to go dark. So as the sun is setting, the moon comes up because they're opposite each other.
Yeah.
And then the full moon stays up all night and sets in the morning as the sun is rising. So that's a full moon. We then have the moon moving through its own cycle, which doesn't exactly correlate to the sun's or the Earth's axial spin that gives us our daylight and nighttime. So there are moments when the moon is visible in the daytime. And that's because it's only when it's a full moon that you get the moon up all night. Sometimes you have to wait till 3 or 4 in the morning for the moon to rise, and then it will be in the sky and potentially visible right through till late morning.
Yeah.
And lunchtime. And other times it's in the sky early in the evening, and then it's in the sky and visible until perhaps midnight or 2 or 3 in the morning, and then it sets. And you've still got darkness, but the moon's no longer there. So the moon in its own cycle will change its position in the sky, and therefore sometimes the sun is up and so is the moon.
Right. Okay.
But when it is, it won't be a full moon, other than first thing in the morning when the moon is just setting as the sun rises.
Speaking of full moons, full moons, they affect me. I always have done, really. I always find myself drained off a full moon. You know, for maybe sometimes 2-3 days, I don't normally have bad moods, but I could be quite irritable sometimes.
That's interesting. So you really notice it, and for how long? Just
2 or 3 days. It's not been as bad this past 12 months, but over the years, and Lou would tell you that as well, that the moon would affect me, the full moon.
Yeah.
And I'd be tired from the full moon.
That's very interesting. There are so many people affected by it.
Mm.
And actually, you know, many of my friends kind of laugh at me, and I think that's probably what set me on some of this quest for knowledge and information about the moon. I didn't like it. It's beautiful. Looks great in the sky. It's interesting. There's lots of cool stuff to talk about. But I felt it was very controlling. Just extrapolating the point that it pulls the oceans into mountains that ships have to sail up and down. You know, sailors will tell you that is true. If it's doing that to the oceans, to the massive bodies of water on the planet,
And we're a high percentage of water.
what the fuck is it doing to us?
Exactly.
So I didn't like that. As someone who doesn't like to be controlled.
Yeah.
It's very off-putting. And my friends who would wear those wonderful T-shirts, the moon made me do it. And we would have some very interesting discussions about the moon and the moon's energy. And I as much as I appreciate it in astrology, I also have this sort of
hate relation.
Hate, but
Okay.
well, love and dislike, and dislike, shall we say.
It brings out the moonsters.
Yes, and the lunatics.
And the lunatics, absolutely. And it's obviously the werewolf story is very much on the full moon.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It is a fascinating experience. And you speak to anybody who works in A&E or police officers or bouncers at the
there'll be more incidents around the full moon.
Aye. Yeah.
Yeah, there will be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting the level of control that it has on us, on our water. It's not just its astrological influences on us, but as you pointed out, it's affecting your emotions. And we go back to the conversation right at the start where we touched on the astrological implications.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is very interesting. So you were mentioning before about could this be an object that has been put in place because of its
Yeah.
perfection. So you'd be open to um, theories then, I suppose, that you know more deeper waters of the fact that it's not natural. Because some people would say, like we mentioned, potentially there was two moons. Um, the
Yeah.
stories of the moon may be artificial, or it's hollow.
Yes. Yeah. The artificial moon story obviously reminds us of the Death Star.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
And the moon is I'm trying to remember the percentage. Uh, I can't remember the exact percentage, excuse me, but it's so big in relation to the Earth in comparison to all the other planets and their moons.
Mm.
It's the biggest of the moons. You know, there's many that orbit Jupiter and Saturn, for example, but they're tiny in
Yeah,
comparison to their
yeah.
host planet. But our moon is so big that actually, rather than it fully orbit the Earth, and like the Earth being in its position and the moon goes round it as the Earth goes round the sun, what's actually happening is they do a dance. It
Okay.
pulls, the Earth is pulled by the moon and vice versa.
So there is a good control from the moon then.
Yeah, there's many say that it stabilizes the Earth's seasons. And was this, if we go back to ancient times, pre-civilizations here, that perhaps some alien civilization looked and saw that there was a planet that was rich and diverse in the minerals and the things that could be harvested here, and yet it was slightly unstable with its weather. Could they do something to stabilize that? And
Interesting.
so,
What a
so
theory.
bringing them, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and so bringing a moon in there stabilizes the planet, changes its movement, and gives us a much more sustainable and livable surface to inhabit.
Interesting theory. I've not heard that one. That's an interesting one.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
yeah.
fascinating. And of course, you mentioned about it being potentially being hollow.
Yes.
So we know that the moon, when it's been struck by rockets, it rings like a bell.
Mm.
And why do bells ring? Because a solid chunk of metal will ring like a gong. I do sound therapy, and so I know
Mm.
that a
Mhm.
big gong will ring, but um, a big sphere, a big solid sphere, I've not tried to make one of them ring, and I suspect that might be quite difficult rather than a flat, slightly concave or convex sheet of brass.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, However, a bell, which is hollow, will ring. So we know that the moon rings like a bell when it's struck. Um, and that's very interesting. I think they say to try and justify that it's fractures in the rocks of the moon's surface.
Right, okay.
I I don't know. I can't prove or disprove that that's the case.
No, no.
I just think it's fascinating. Like it's really really interesting that it rings, and there's also other um, factors that add into that to make the suggestion of a potential hollow moon a little bit more feasible. Those being that for its size, as we try using the Earth's density to correlate how heavy the moon should be when they work out its weight,
Mm.
it's too light. It's far too light. So either it's it's like a cheese that's full of holes that's really, really soft and therefore much lighter than it than it looks, or there's some hollow cavities, or there's a massive hollow cavity in the middle.
Yeah.
Um, So other things that I've heard about it in relation to that, and again, I can't state that it's true or false, and I'm happy to be proved wrong on this point, is that we look at the surface of the moon and we see all those craters. There are an endless number of them, particularly on the Earth-facing side. On the far side, we'll not call it the dark side, because sometimes when we've got a new moon, it's all lit up. You know, when our side is dark. So on the far side of the moon, when you look at images of that from satellites, it's not quite as pockmarked as the Earth-facing side.
Mm.
So that seems to have had more impacts.
Mm.
But when we look at if you were to drop an explosive object into soil, so drop a hand grenade or a bomb or some other thing like that into soil, we can calculate with ballistics that we know that it's going to create a crater that's so wide and so deep. If you drop it onto other types of material, sand or rock or any other stuff, you can calculate the size of the hole that you're going to create, and based on the size of the hole, the depth of the hole.
Yeah.
So there is a suggestion that the biggest of those craters on the moon are not deep enough for the impacts, that there is a depth that they get to and they don't go any deeper. And I also heard, I don't know whether this is true, but I'll say it anyway, that the ground penetrating radar that's been pointed at the moon only goes to a certain depth, which is not far deeper than the deepest crater. And then it can't go any further. It's as if it hits a brick wall that stops it. So that would suggest that perhaps the outer part, which is like, I think, maybe 4 kilometers or so, is some skin, some surface, and then you've got some object that's impenetrable and hollow on the inside. So does that make it a space station? Does that make it an alien probe? Is it something that's a control station? Has it been pulled in there by some other civilization to help populate the planet and therefore create a slave race to harvest the things that they need us to harvest?
Well, who's to say? I mean, some people would say it's a portal as well. You know, when you die, you could choose which way you go to be. You know, we end up being resurrected and returning back here.
Yeah, that ties into our conversation from our last podcast chat about spirits and the 8th sphere.
The 8th sphere, yeah.
So the 8th sphere is related to the moon. So yeah, that ties all that in.
Reincarnation. I should have said not resurrected. Reincarnation. I mean, it's interesting. You know, go to the light. Which light do you go to?
Well, yeah. I mean, we can expand this a little bit further and look at the fact that Saturn used to be called the sun. You know, we have an ancient solar system that was very different from the one that we have today. We have potentially a moon that's been created, pulled into place by some civilization that has the capacity to create megastructures. We have a destroyed planet that should have been where the asteroid belt is. That they've calculated that if you blow a planet up, that probably 90% of the debris from that will be lost through the solar system and beyond, and 10% or so will remain. And if you take what's in the asteroid belt and add it all together and multiply it by 10, you then have a massive planet that would have been there. And there are ancient stories of a planet that was there and was destroyed, and also ancient stories about the birth of Venus, that Venus itself is a new planet. We, of course, have some very interesting tales that were told by actual scientists in the last century who were completely destroyed by their colleagues for believing that it was born of Jupiter, that Venus was born of Jupiter. So it's not just the moon that has these wonderful ancient stories of potential creation or crafting or some other origin, that also relates to Venus and the different power that Saturn held back in those days as well. And there's also stories of way back then that the Earth's orbit was a different length, like way back. So this would have been long before the time of our stone circle builders, who were using their 366-degree circles. Long before that. I'm sure you've read some of the tales of Enki and Enlil. And
The Anunnaki and
so that, for those that don't know, the brief summary is that they came from another planet, and that planet is detailed in lots of clay tablets, the stories of the Anunnaki, and that their father was in charge of the planet, and there was a problem with that planet's atmosphere, and they needed a certain substance to make the atmosphere healthy. And through a long-winded tale, one of their relatives ended up moving beyond the asteroid belt and coming into the inner planets, and finding that this planet here, planet Earth, was abundant with the substance that they needed, and set about harvesting that. So perhaps they brought the moon into place. Perhaps that's something that was done by them. Their father was called Ea, and so the Earth was Earth, was named after him. Yeah. So is it that the moon was brought in that time, so that it stabilized the Earth and allowed them the opportunity to genetically modify the species that were already there, and create a hybrid race, initially creating a hybrid race that
and a
was a little
slave
bit
race.
Yeah. Well, initially the first one that apparently created was too powerful and unable to procreate, and these were the Titans,
Yes,
the Nephilim,
the
and the
Nephilim.
like.
That's right.
Yeah. And then later on, they created the Adam, and the Adam became Adam, and the story of Adam and Eve
That's right. Yeah.
stems from all that. And so that would make us a created race, which is very interesting when you think about the fact that there is no other animal on Earth that needs to put clothes on.
I know.
Every other animal lives in an environment that it can sustain itself with its natural covering.
Yeah.
And
Although I must admit, Chris, I used to knock around with a lot of people in Wigan who never wore clothes on night time.
Well, I'm from Scotland, and it's taps half weather up there regularly. And you just need to go to Newcastle on a Friday night and you see the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you get the point.
Absolutely. No, I've been looking into it quite a lot recently. I think there's something in this. I think there's something in this.
Yeah. It's I've been digging into that story and variations of it and little tangents and sidetracks for 3 decades now, and honestly, mate, I feel like I've just started.
I can imagine.
There's so much to dig in and look at, and it's hard to get to the depths of it, particularly in this modern age of information, which should make it easier. But there's so much shit getting put out there and spun over the top of it.
And Sitchin's probably not one to rely on either.
No.
So you just don't know who was funding that situation as well. So we're in that kind of war constantly. I think that information war, to find out who we truly are and where we truly come from, which is quite an interesting way to talk about when we just came about to discuss the moon. But that's what it always seems to come back to for me, is we need to remember who we are, and that's the journey we're on.
Yeah. So, but you've mentioned the moon again, so let's
carry on. Let's carry on.
Yeah, let's nip back into that. I'm sure you do. You'll know who Richard C. Hoagland is.
Yeah.
Wonderful researcher. I've loved his work for years and loved listening to him. And Obviously, I was a big fan of Art Bell back in the day as well. So I've sat and watched and listened to many of their chats and viewpoints. But Hoagland has put together a number of things about not just the moon, but Mars as well. Of course, the face of Mars, he did a lot of stuff on that in the early days. But a little rundown of some of the things that he looked at specifically in relation to the moon are artificial structures on both sides of the moon. There are some images of what look like, there's one that looks like a massive spacecraft, a long tubular crash landing on the moon, which is deeply fascinating. There are some apparently glass domes and transparent structures that were visible in the imagery from the alleged Apollo missions that were like reflective, and they were, Hoagland interpreted them as like habitats, that potential places that people or beings could live in. That there were also ruins, or there are ruins on the moon. Many of them, there's what would you be class as like debris fields filled with strange angular pieces of stone or whatever debris, that could be viewed as collapsed cities or ancient dwellings. And then of course there's the big structures, the famous ones like the Shard. That's massive, tall. I don't know exactly the height of it, but I know it's been calculated as as big as skyscrapers, or bigger. I can't remember if it's like more than a kilometer or miles into the sky, but it's enormous. And they've seen the shadow of the Shard at certain angles when sunlight is shining across the surface.
Right. Okay.
There's another one called the Castle.
Right.
So that's like a big blocky, multi-leveled structure that's seen in a few lunar orbiter images. There's many satellites that are orbiting the moon and have for decades now. So Hoagland saw all of these things and was big into questioning them and looking at them and trying to figure out, is there something about these? Obviously, many of these images come from NASA, and we know that there's a lot of people in our world who think that NASA stands for never a straight answer, and that they are, mislabeling images.
I always say T minus because it brings Satan when you bring the T back in with NASA.
Well, yeah. It's very, very, very true.
Yeah. But I don't trust NASA, but it's not to say they don't say truthful stuff as well, because that's how it works. If they are what you would class as controlled opposition, because they get a lot, their money they're funded is outrageous.
Yeah, it's phenomenal what they've received and what they continually get. And that brings us to the point of the moon landings.
Okay.
It was inevitable.
I don't believe for 1 second that Armstrong and that landed on the moon, personally.
There's loads of things that people say that the videos were created by a Hollywood director, and
there is that story.
It's a great story. It's very intriguing, and the references to some of his films where there's like the two little girls that have got the moon.
Yeah, it was. That's right. Yeah.
This is all stuff that people have said before.
The Shining. It's on The Shining, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure many of your viewers are aware of that already. But then there's like the flag. Is the flag waving? Was it filmed in a studio? And it probably was filmed in a studio.
Yeah, that
with stuff.
buggy, the way that buggy moves, and it looks like if you slow it down, it looks ridiculous. But
Yeah, it's crazy.
and the contraption, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't be trust myself to fly to the next street and that, never mind to the moon.
Yeah, but the big thing for me, we could sit and debate all of those points
Oh yeah,
endlessly.
yeah.
The big thing for me that is like, well, none of those matter when we look at this one point, and that is the Van Allen radiation belts.
Agreed. How do you get through that?
Right.
Yeah,
I think it was about three or 4 years ago that there was a press conference for the mission to Mars. So this big, great, thing, we're going to go to Mars and we've got to try and figure out how to get people there. We've got to get people out of the Earth's atmosphere and, all this stuff. And the guy from NASA is standing with a straight face saying one of the big problems that we figure out is how to get through the Van Allen radiation belt.
without melting.
Like, what? Why can't you go and look at the data from all of those supposed flights that got there?
Well, didn't they lose the blueprints of all the
the blueprints and all the data and all of that, the important stuff?
Just lost it.
Yeah,
like you would.
Yeah. I think it was all underneath Building 7.
Yeah.
It got lost with all that gold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe the paper just all got tired and decided to disintegrate. So
yeah.
We don't know. It's a funny old world out there,
isn't it?
But in all seriousness, the Van Allen radiation belts. How do you get all of those men past those radiation belts at twice, going out and coming back, and then them landing and having long lives where they're not irradiated and damaged?
Yeah, I'm not buying it, Chris. I
just
can't buy that at all. I'm just not. I'm not in the 60s in those suits and the technology that they have then to what we have now, and the fact that he could make a phone call from the moon to the president, and I could go to a part of the house and not get any signal with my mobile phone in 2026.
Yeah,
I'm not buying it.
No, I can't. I think if we applied the same logic that we have to apply to theories, apparently, that we are interested in, apply that logic. How do I prove that the Earth's flat, or that the Earth's a globe, or how do I prove that some black flag incident happened? How can I prove that what truly went on in 20 happened? We can apply logic and sense and reasoning and come to quite good understandings. So apply that same logic and those principles to trying to prove how you could get those men past the Van Allen radiation belts.
You might come back with COVID. Maybe that's where it came from.
Oh my days! Oh my goodness! Yeah, it's interesting.
It's very interesting. I mean, the thing is, we know how governments work and elite types work in terms of controlling populations. We know they play little games with us, and they have done for a long time. I think now they may struggle to prove that moon landing properly if they decide to debate it.
Yeah, I think it's believed by so many because it's as they say, it's easier to tell a lie and get people to believe it than it is to tell people that they've been lied to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, look at 9/11.
Okay, so in a time, if we look with hindsight, you know, that wonderful hindsight, we can look back at the political aims of the day, and you had the Russians getting a race first, getting a man up first, getting a dog up first, getting all of those first there, and the Americans were like, wait a minute, we can't have that. We need to win. And then their president said, by the end of this decade, we will be on the moon. And they're getting close to the end of the decade, and they're like, well, how are we getting the man on the moon? Look, Kubrick will do it. To me, it was a political ploy. It was for that specific reason, and it helped. It really did help, and push in the Western world, America, and many, many, many other countries
with a superpower
watching all of that. Yeah, and it was, you know, added into all the political stuff that was going on post Second World War, where the States were in this wonderful zone economically. You know, if you were alive and a young working man in those days in the 50s, your wife didn't need to work. You could go out, get a job, you could buy a house, a car, a boat, all the things that you wanted on your wage. And the economy was booming, and every part of their country was booming as they need to be, right up until the I think the economic downturn started in about 1973 from stuff that I've researched. So they had, during that time that the supposed moon landings happened, they had this wonderful zone that as a nation, as a power, that they were sitting in. So if we look at all that stuff, look at the political status, what was going on, not just there, but the rest of the world, look at what was happening for the, you know, your everyman in every that country at that time. It was really important for their powers to come out on top in such a big subject.
Absolutely.
And so to have a ruse like that, you can see why they did it.
You can.
And then they just have to keep lying. They just have to keep lying. So,
and they do. And they do. And the majority still fall for it all.
Yeah. I want to tell you a very short, interesting personal tale in relation to the moon.
Yeah, please.
So many years ago in Scotland, when I was living up there, I ran a little group in my home. I think I've told you about, and we spoke about the subjects of waking up, of spirituality, waking up to what's going on in the world. We looked at documentaries on 9/11 and from 9/11 to ayahuasca and all sorts of other things in between. We looked at hands-on healing and crystals and astrology and all sorts of subjects. And it was an open forum where I invited people into my home, never charged them any money. Actually, I spent money putting food on the table and making sure everybody was fed that evening. Once a week, every week for 4 years I did it. And one of the guys who came along for most of that time is a lovely guy. I think he's got 3 sons. They were all quite young. His eldest son was about 4 at the time. And I don't know if he has permission to share the story, so I'm not going to say either of their names, but if he ever hears this, he'll know it's him and his son. And he, you know, he was just a nice guy, nice family man, very down to earth. And he would come along and he was interested. And it was 2012. There was the talk of the end of the world, the end of the Mayan calendar, on the winter solstice, and people were interested and people were fearful. And I was talking about a lot of subjects, and they felt a bit of comfort talking to someone who seemed like he might know a little bit about what he was talking about. I probably didn't, but I seemed like I did. And we got lots of people chatting. Anyway, he's come along and we're having lots of chats, and he would go home and talk to his wife. You know, the eldest of his kids, very, very smart young man. he often heard some of these things, and he heard my name mentioned quite a bit. And he was sitting with his dad one day, and he said, "Dad, what's that? What's that thing? You know that thing in the sky?" He said, "What thing in the sky?" He's like, "Do you know the thing in the sky that controls us? The thing that controls us." He was 4.
Wow, interesting.
Right, a really sharp little kid, really, really sharp kid who was
Interesting.
intuitive. Yeah, and it was like really funny, and Dad's like, what do you mean? And he's like, Dad. Ask Chris. Chris knows. He'll know. He'll know the thing. It's in the sky. And we came to the conclusion that he was probably from everything that he said. It could, of course, have been a satellite that he was talking about, but just from the stuff, and remember he's only 4, so you can only get so much information out of him. But he said that thing that controls us.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always stuck with me. Like, what was that? Was he? Because we questioned him, and just we didn't want to push too hard. He's just a little boy,
but
so we had a little chat and one day and asked him about it, and was it the moon? And he just kind of ignored me and went back to playing with his toys. So we didn't push it. It was a little question, and I didn't go back and ask
but
again.
that's
It was,
that's
we
come
tried it
naturally,
once.
though. There's no thought there. That's like an instant, isn't it?
Right?
That's
Yeah.
so. Because some believe the moon plays a role in sort of limiting or looping human consciousness, doesn't it? And like others would see it as a teacher or an initiator, or it's a mysterious object, and it definitely has a pull.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
A pull.
Fascinating that he would come out with that and expect that us adults would just know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Like, we must just know. You must know, Dad. Of course you know. And Chris knows. He'll know because you go and talk to him about all stuff, so he knows. Ask him. And it's like really interesting. And we actually went down a bit of a rabbit hole at that time, which leads me to another little point on this that we haven't yet discussed. And that is that there's a theory, and I mentioned earlier on about the other planets. There's a theory about Saturn. Now, in mythology, Saturn is Kronos.
Time.
He's
Yeah.
Father Time. Remember near the beginning, I said about the days of the week and why Sunday's the first day of the week.
Yeah.
So if anybody says, "Oh, it's got to be Monday and Saturday and Sunday the weekend," that's just been imposed on us because of our working week and because we managed to get holiday 2 days off a week that we never used to get.
Well, we're weakened. We're weakened.
Well, yeah. But I mean, a century or more ago, we had to work 7 days.
True.
It was the unions and all that, I believe, that got us our days off. So we've got 7 days of the week because there are 5 visible planets with naked eye, and there are 2 luminaries. So the 2 luminaries come first, the sun and the moon, and then 5 planets. But if you look at it from the sun being the center of the solar system, so you get the 2 luminaries. It doesn't do it in order. It's not that Mercury's the next day. It's the sun, and then the moon, and then Mars, Mardi in French.
Okay.
We obviously have the Norse mythology superimposed. If you go to like Italy and France and Spain and Portugal and so on, the Romance language countries, they've still got the original Latin versions. So you've got the direct names of the planets, and we've got Tu, the Norse god of war. So Tuesday is Mars Day, Mardi. And then we've got Woden's Day,
Right.
the Wednesday, but that's Mercury's Day.
Right.
If I use French. Then also in French, Jeudi Day. We call it Thor's. It's for Thor Day.
Right,
Thor's
Thursday.
Day.
Mm.
Yeah, and then the second, there's two feminine ones and 5 masculine. The moon is obviously feminine, and Friday is feminine. Freya, Frigg, Fry, the
Okay.
goddess.
Yeah.
And then Vendredi, Venus's day, and
Mm.
Venus is feminine as well. And then the last day of the week is Saturn. Saturn is the visible planet that's the furthest, and that's why it's called Father Time, because it actually has its orbit encircles all of the others.
Right.
Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Earth, all the rest of them are within the orbit of Saturn. So Saturn is Father Time, is Kronos.
Mm.
Saturn is also Satan.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn is also Sauron.
Mm.
Saturn is the one ring to rule them all and in the darkness bind them.
Mm.
That's where that mythology comes from. That's, Tolkien knew that. That's why you wear Saturn's ring on your finger and you get married on Saturn's day, because Saturnian energy is you set things in stone.
Interesting. Yeah.
Astrologically. Yeah. And Saturn's also called the Black Sun.
Yeah.
So we have the Black Sun Society, and during this, up to and during the Second World War, there was the Thule Society that Hitler funded, and had those crazy women worked within that, giving them all sorts of information. Those
Mm.
psychic ladies, the Vril,
Mm.
and their symbol is a black sun. Is in this black sun, and then the rays coming off it are black. And it's alleged that there is some power base either within Saturn or on one of Saturn's moons
Yeah.
that is then beaming energy and using the moon as the reflector to control the energies on Earth. So
I've heard that. Mm.
we jostled with the idea, is that what this little boy was talking about? That it was actually the moon via Saturn that was the
Mm.
controlling element, or is the controlling element that holds a power over us. Because there's many people view, as you know, there's many people view the Earth planet. I don't necessarily personally subscribe to that, and
Mm-hmm.
as I've mentioned in previous conversations, I don't think that we have a karmic trap. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I do know that it's a very interesting set of tales that when you add them all, it creates this bigger story, this interesting understanding. And, if you believe in the understanding of animism, that everything is animated, everything has life, then planets will have life and consciousness.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
therefore, Mother Earth, Gaia, she has
Mm.
that conscious life, and so does the sun, and so do all the planets, and that would Saturn. And Saturn, interestingly, when you listen to the sounds of the planets, I mentioned earlier on about a friend of mine who helped create the sounds of the spheres, the music of the spheres,
Yeah.
taking the frequencies coming from the various planets and luminaries and turning them into sound. Saturn's, when you listen to that, man, it sounds creepy.
Yeah. I've heard it actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's proper
Yeah.
creepy. Really
Well,
interesting. So, is it the moon is the surface of it being used, because we know that it reflects sunlight. It doesn't actually emit light of its own. Is it reflecting stuff? Is it reflecting stuff not just from the sun, but from some output from the Saturnian system?
well,
Who knows?
Saturn's a podcast in itself, isn't it? It's a massive subject when the cube and everything else, and Mecca and the Saturnian clothing and everything. It's a
Yeah.
massive subject in itself. But yes, the moon. That would absolutely make sense to me. That there is some kind of controlling element coming from Saturn, trapping us in time. and using the moon as a reflector. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, who knows?
Who
I
knows?
don't necessarily subscribe to that idea. I haven't been able to delve in enough to it to, a bit like you were saying about, is the Earth flat or is it a globe? You just don't know.
No, I
You've
don't know.
not researched it enough. That's my response to that one. I don't know.
I don't know either. Even if I researched it enough, Chris, I still wouldn't know.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the reality of it. I may have an opinion from my research, but I wouldn't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I probably will never know. But it's interesting. There's something in it. I think there's something in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think, obviously it does play, the moon plays a big part in our lives. There's no doubt about that. It has as that. Should we be working with the moon then in that respect?
That's a great question. So, as an astrologer, taking us back to the beginning of our conversation, the moon affects our emotions and many other parts of us, and is a fundamental, powerful element within our character makeup and our personality traits,
Mm.
and affects us from the moment that we're born. So we have to take it into account. Should we work with it or should we work against it? That's a great question. And it makes me, it reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my friends in Scotland, who's a beautiful lady. Her name's Jo, and she's a magical practitioner. She's a hedge witch. She makes lotions and potions, and she's a very nice lady, and she loves the moon.
Mm.
And I've had many a conversation with her about it, and she'd be like, "Come on, Chris, it's the moon. You got to love the moon." And I'm like, "Well, do I really have to love the moon, Joe? Why do you love the moon?" And she's like, "Come on, it's the moon, and we work with the moon, and we charge our crystals in the full moon, and you start things on the new moon." And with that regard, I have a friend who's a very good gardener and grower, and he swears by the fact that you should plant things on a new moon, and if you do, you will get a better yield in your harvest.
I've heard about fasting on new moon and things like that as well.
Yeah, and for energetic purposes, working with the new moon in that regard, and with full moon as well. So start things on a new moon, and it comes to fruition on the full. There's much more that you can do with the moon in that regard, but those are simple things that we can actually get direct results from, that would suggest that working with the moon is important. But Josie asked me a question one day, and she said, "Chris, do you believe in past lives?" Like, yeah. "Do you believe that you chose to come here?" "Yeah." "So you chose this life?" "Yeah." "And you chose to come at this time?" "So would you be aware then that you chose to come to live on a planet that had a moon?" "Yeah." She said, "Well, fucking deal with it then. You chose to come and live on a planet with the moon, so work with the moon. Utilize the moon's energy in the times when you don't need to love it, but at least accept the fact that it is there, and you incarnated into this life where there is a moon. And whether you want to like it or not, you have to deal with that situation. If it's pulling every body of water on the planet, it's pulling you, and it's pulling everybody else. And as you said earlier, it affects you at a full moon and many, many, many other people. So can I fight it? Should I spend all my time trying not to be controlled by them, or should I utilize those moon energies at the right time without becoming necessarily a worshipper of the moon? And that's what I decided, mate. I decided the best thing that I could do is understand its positive uses, like for growing crops and for starting ventures. And other than that, I don't do too much with it.
So you don't swim against the tide.
No, no. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, that's that.
It's I've had conversations in the past. I mean, we'll wrap up soon because we're done over 2 hours. It's been fantastic conversation. I loved it, and but I remember I had a conversation with a wonderful lady called Ola Volney. I don't know if you know Ola. She does some great work, and she does a lot of Norse stuff actually. But she talks a lot about the matrix itself, and she would say that you know, the moon is part of that, and we shouldn't be working with the moon. But everyone's got their own opinions and their own paths and their
Yeah.
own ways of doing things. You know, like people they feel that we're in a reincarnation trap would suggest that you know, we're in a simulation while others don't, and we've just got to find our own journey and our own way on this. And it's clear to me the moon has a part to play in our experience here. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your last comment there is spot on. It clearly ought to play. You know, we can choose to ignore it and not participate, and that's okay. And we can try and avoid it, and that's also okay.
Mm.
But I spent a long time trying to avoid it and realized that, you know, whatever it is, it's having an impact. So what should I do? Should I ignore that impact, or should I try and give myself the best opportunities by recognizing the cards that are on the table and play with them?
Mm.
And that's what I'm choosing to do. I can see what's there, and I play with that. I really am interested in the matrix theory and the simulation theory. You know, because mathematically and computer based, we can create simulations now that mimic
Oh,
what we
wow,
have.
yeah.
But while I'm interested in them, I just can't buy into it. And we've lived for a long time without electricity and computers. It's only in the, you know, on the grand scale of human life that we remember, there is a huge amount of time that there was no electricity use. Our ancestors and previous civilizations may have used it, but we've had thousands of years where people were simple farmers, you know, living off the land, working in the land, living in communities, and they weren't living in a simulation. They were just living in life, living in the wet and the cold and the hot and the dry, and, you know, surviving and thriving and doing what any species does, which is reproduce and try and make sure that your species continues to exist. Because ultimately, that's what humanity's trying to do. We might think we have some higher purpose, and there very well may be a higher purpose to us as an over soul species. But when you look at the day to day, you know, and this is a potential conversation for some point in the future as well, is looking at what's happening in the world and how those in power have said for generations that the world is overpopulated, which it isn't, in my opinion.
No.
And they want to reduce the population, and that is like completely against what you look at any other species, any other, and we are part of the animal kingdom. You know, we might classify nature as something outside windows because we live in these stone and wood and glass boxes that hide us from the weather and artificially heat us. But we are still part of nature. It's not something that we watch on a TV show and witness. It's part of what we are.
Mm-hmm.
And every part of nature, every species is trying to reproduce and trying to continue their dance, their life, their, you know, seeding or pollinating or rutting season or mating season. All of these things are all about reproduction, and that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to keep living as a species. Is that something within the matrix, or is it just a simple thing that we're all, that there's this, because we've got this higher function of higher thought and capacity to know ourselves and to have deep philosophical thoughts and questions? Is it just because we've got that and we've been able to develop with our brains and our opposable thumbs that we can, we can make things, bring ourselves to a point where we have high civilization before Mother Nature comes in and wipes us all back to the Stone Age again, like she's done before. Is that a simulation? I don't know, but it's interesting.
It is interesting. All that's an interesting subject, and with the resets and things like that, that all ties in as a very, very interesting conversation. Maybe we should do that at some point and go into it. It is an interesting thing, and we don't know what really has happened, because if you're in a simulation, you could have you're just in a program. So how do you know?
Very true. Very true. How can you get out of that? We've got so much in our, in our movies and TV shows that point to that. From obviously the movie The Matrix, which is the wonderful explanation and brilliant story.
Fabulous. Yeah.
I found it very interesting to realize that the person who wrote the stories of The Matrix also wrote the stories of the Terminator, and they're actually sequels.
That's right. Yeah.
Terminators earlier on.
Well, we're seeing. I mean, again, this is another subject, isn't it? Because we're seeing humanity going full throttle into that at the moment.
Yeah.
Full throttle.
Yeah. And so is it that we're not in a simulation yet, but we're about to put ourselves in one because we're letting AI develop to such a point that they're going to put robots out there that'll control us? The Terminator thing will come true, and then the Matrix will come true.
If we're in a dream, we're about to put ourselves in a dream within a dream. I mean, it's like it's Inception, isn't it? We can keep going deeper and deeper into the layers of all of this, and these are brilliant subjects to discuss, and it does tie into the way humanity's heading, though. It does. The transhumanism agenda is the big thing. For me, that's where we're heading. And they're pulling us away from being human. Why is the question? Why? Why would they want to do that?
Well, we individually might not find out. It might be our children's children that find out, but we will see.
Indeed. Chris, it's been brilliant again. For people that haven't seen you before, I know you've not watched with me and talk with Chris before. Check the other ones out about mediumship, because that's a fantastic conversation. How would people get in touch with you? What are you up to now? I know you're doing a lot of sound baths up and down the UK. What are you up to at the moment? And how do people get in touch with you?
So I'll send you a link to both. I'm working on a website at the moment because I'm doing a couple of things. I've got a few projects that are up and running. I'm currently writing a book, which is going really well. I've got it all structured out. It's a book that's been a long time coming, and I'm hoping to have that at least the first draft finished probably by summer solstice and get that out there. Start promoting that into the summer months. I have a second book in the planning once I've done that, but creating a website at the moment to advertise that once it's out, but also my guided meditations. I've been requested to start recording the guided meditations that I do during sound baths and also just meditation classes. So I'm based in Yorkshire. People can get me on Facebook. I can give you the link to that. I have a simple sort of drop page, chrisnicholson.card.co. Card is double R, and Nicholson does not have an H. chrisnicholson.card.co, and from there people can get onto my Facebook and email me. And my YouTube channel as well. So there'll be quite a bit coming online. I am doing sound baths. I've got a new sound bath coming up next month, a brand new one I've just organised, and I'm also, you know, looking at some other places around the country to do that. But my main focus at the moment is my book and my guided meditations, and getting a website up and running to promote and advertise those. So yeah, you can get me on those social platforms.
Wonderful, Chris. It's been an honour as always, and we'll do another one soon, I hope.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure coming on. I really appreciate our chats and being able to talk about these obscure and interesting subjects with another open-minded soul, and let other people sit and have a listen to the meanderings and wandering thoughts of, of our two brains.
Well, hopefully
yeah,
hopefully we'll meet up in person again this year as well at some point. So, but much love to you, and congratulations on your engagement as well. And we'll catch up really soon, brother.
Thank you very much, bro. You take care.
You too.